Okay, I think that looks all right. Okay, so the Artist in the Library program, Toronto Arts Council program. The deadline for this program is November 2nd. It's a fairly new program at Toronto Arts Council. It's only been around since 2014. So, you know, we're still developing it as we go, and you'll see it change a little bit each year. The one thing that people may notice has changed substantially from last year's program is that the program is a little bit smaller, but we're going to be giving out more grants. So rather than larger projects for $20,000, they'll be for smaller projects for $10,000, and we'll have twice as many grants available. And COVID is partially the reason that we're doing this. There just isn't that intensive access to programming time and space, you know, in the branches at the moment, and probably for the foreseeable future. So we've decided to sort of take this new direction with the program and see how it goes. So what does this program support? So the Artist in the Library program is an artist residency. So it's a community engaged artist residency that takes place in selected branches of the Toronto Public Library. So it's not all the branches in the city or whichever branch is closest to your house. It's actually a list of 19 branches that you can choose from. And the reason that those branches have been selected is that this program is really strategically designed to create programming opportunities and paid opportunities for artists, specifically outside of the downtown core, looking at the inner suburbs of the city. So Etobicoke, North York, and Scarborough primarily. So the grant amount for all projects is a flat amount, and it's $10,000. There is a budget associated with the program. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but that is primarily to cover artist fees and project-related expenses. So the resident artist will deliver free public arts programming, and this could be a wide range of activities. It may be performances, community-engaged arts activities, visual and media arts installations and exhibitions, workshops, artist talks, open studio sessions, arts education programs, mentorship opportunities, or really kind of anything that you dream up. We may be missing a lot of different things there. It's a very, very open program, open to all types of artistic disciplines. Although a lot of the programming that's currently happening is mostly digital, there is still the opportunity to think about some other alternative forms of programming that may or may not take place inside the branch, depending on what's happening when you go to actually carry out your program. So who is eligible to apply for this program? This program is open to professional artists, nonprofit arts organizations, or artist collectives. And the way that the Toronto Arts Council defines a professional artist is someone who has developed their skills through training and or practice and is recognized as such by artists working in the same artistic tradition, and someone that actively practices their art form, seeks payment for their work, and has a history of public presentation. So as you can see, it's a pretty wide and open definition. You don't have to have gone to school to be considered a professional artist. That just would be somebody who has learned how to make art and who does make art. So it's a pretty wide definition. And if anyone has any questions about whether or not you think you could be considered a professional artist, just let me know and we can talk about it, but we're very open. The funding categories at the Toronto Arts Council are kind of in two distinct envelopes, arts discipline funding and strategic funding. So you can actually have a grant, one grant in each category. So if you're a visual artist, you could have a visual arts grant, a project grant, and you could have an artist in the library residency grant, or another type of strategic program grant like animating Toronto parks or animating Toronto streets and all the other types of strategic programs. So you're able to have one in each category. as the particular entity that you're applying under, whether that's yourself as an individual artist, whether that's your collective or your arts organization. So yeah, that's all I need to say about that. So I wanted to just go through what is needed, what you sort of need to get ready for this application. The best thing to do is just to sit and read the program guidelines from beginning to end, and then to just open up an application and just click through it to see what the main parts are and what the things are that you have to go away and prepare. But the main sections of this grant, just so you know, are the project details section, and that's where you're going to talk about what branch you want to be working in. Maybe you're going to list a bunch of different branches. Maybe it doesn't matter which branch you get put in. Maybe your project is incredibly branch specific and community specific. All of those possibilities are totally okay. So you're going to put your branch selection there. You're going to put your project dates. You're going to write a nice, concise, beautiful project summary that describes what you want to do. You're going to also list all of the contributors to your project. It may just be yourself, and if that's the case, that's totally okay, but you may have some collaborators that you're bringing in. Maybe you're having guest artists to come in and do workshops or collaborate with you. Maybe you know, this is where you put all of your collective members. So you'll require CVs and brief bios for every project contributor. And the next section of the grant is the project description. So this is where you're really going to talk about what you're going to be doing and how you're going to be doing it. So this is where you get to write your nice 500-word project overview, where you talk about the sort of how and why and where and what of your project. There's also a section that you can discuss your artistic goals and objectives. This is sort of like, you know, an artistic curatorial statement. So you're really talking about why you want to do this project and sort of how it feeds you as an artist, because we really want this project, we really want this program to feed you. We want it to really help you develop and experiment and explore new areas of your own practice. We don't want you to feel like, you know, you're here to teach classes and deliver programming. We want you to feel like you're really here to explore your own practice and, you know, pay yourself for your time to do that work. So this is artistic goals and objectives. It's an important section. There's also a section in which you can discuss, you know, how you're going to work with community on your project. So whether that's, you know, maybe listing the various different partnerships you have with local community organizations, whether that's talking about, you know, how you're going to sort of find your audience for this work, whether it's an audience to view a performance, or whether it's attendees for your workshop, or whatever types of activities that you're doing. So this is where you're talking about all of that. Then there's a section for your work plan. And that's where you're going to just kind of chronologically talk through your project, just one step at a time, all the way from, you know, writing the grant at the beginning to executing your project and then to wrapping it up at the end. And boy, did I ever spell contingency wrong. My spelling is awful today, and I just typed this slide in right before I came on with you. So your contingency plan, I want to talk a little bit about this. This is something new that we've added to the application this year, and this is really to give you a chance to talk about, you know, if you need to have a contingency plan because your plan A is doing some in-person programming in the branch, this would be your plan for a kind of a COVID public health environment that may not allow you to actually be doing programming on site. Of course, we have no idea what's going to happen, you know, when it comes time for you to do your residency. So it's nice to have an extra space in this grant to talk about what that contingency plan might look like, whether that be exhibition in the window front of the branch, whether that be you know, kits, art kits for you know, curbside pickup that community members can come and pick up in order to participate in a workshop, so they have materials and tools. or anything else you can imagine. It's really wide open. There are lots of different ways that artists have found of collaborating with community in a contactless way. So these may be some areas where you can explore sort of some contingency plans there. The next section of the grant application is for your support materials. And this is a really important section. It's where you get to show the scope of your own practice and your own work. So you're going to be showing, you know, images and video and audio of your previous work. Then there's the budget section. There's sort of two pieces to the budget section. And one is a budget form where you just type in your basic budget totals. So, you know, revenue, expenses, just add the totals in there. And then there's a section called supplementary budget notes. And that's where you would upload your more detailed description of the budget items. So that's where you break down all the budget totals. So for instance, I may have, you know, in my budget section, in my expenses section, I may have, say, you know, $7,000 for artist fees. So in my supplementary budget notes section, that's where I can say, well, that $7,000 is based on X number of weeks of my own labor time at, you know, at least CARFAC minimum rates, and it comes up to $7,000 or whatever. This is also where you can break down your expenses. What types of materials or equipment rentals you might require for this project. Any other types of expenses, transportation, you know, when people were doing a lot of on-site programming, what that might look like is some kind of support for the community to be there and participate in your project, whether that's food or snacks or tokens or other forms of transportation, accessible transportation, things like that. And then the other section that's important of the grant, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in a second, is your accessibility expenses section. And this is related to the TAC accessibility grant, which I'll get to in a moment. So I just want to briefly go over what the assessment process is, just so you know what to expect. So all of the TAC grants are all awarded on a competitive basis, and they're awarded by a panel of peers who are practicing artists. So my role as a program manager is really just to support you in putting, you know, together the most solid grant application that you can, and then I'll facilitate the process, but I don't decide, you know, who does and doesn't get funding. So it's not up to me, it's really up to this panel of peers. So the assessment criteria that the peer assessment panel will be using will be artistic merit, the suitability of the proposed project for the particular branch or community that it's located in, the quality of the proposed project in terms of like that participant experience, what the branch users will experience, how they'll benefit from the project, how the project will benefit the local community, things like that. The ability of the applicant to carry out the proposed project, and that you're going to demonstrate just by writing a really solid grant and a good, feasible, nice sounding budget, and also through your support materials, which show that you've done similar work in the past and you know how to undertake this kind of work. And then the final criterion is financial viability of the project, and that's just your budget. You know, have you paid artist fees properly? Like the one thing that I think that peer review panel doesn't want to see is artists being underpaid. So it's really important that you make sure that all the artists in your project are just properly, you know, paid at the rates, depending what rates your particular art practice tends to use, whether that's Canadian Actors Equity Association or, you know, CARFAC or whatever the case may be. So this is the accessibility grants piece that I wanted to talk about. TAC has these accessibility grants that anyone can apply for in a project grant, and it's up to an additional $5,000, and this is specific for eligibility costs for artists who are deaf and artists with disabilities who are participating in your project. So this is not for audience accessibility. This is specifically to support the artists to do the project. So accessibility costs could be ASL interpretation, audio description, things like this. It's really up to those artists with those support access needs that will tell you what they need. So if there's any questions about, you know, whether things are eligible or not, just let me know. We're very open to whatever those access needs might be, so we can talk about that. So we also have support for artists who are applying for this grant, and this is our application access support. So artists who are deaf or artists with disabilities who need support to complete grant applications or final reports can access up to $500 a year in order to pay service providers to support them in doing this work. So if anyone is interested in this, please let me know, and I'll show you how to access that those costs. So this is just a little, I know it's cut off a bit, I think, well, the way I'm looking at it, it's cut off, but it's just top 10 grant writing tips. Sometimes I find this useful to just kind of reflect before you go into the process. The first one is really to read the program guidelines. Find out whether or not you're eligible for the particular project that you're applying for, the program that you're applying for. And is your project a strong fit for this particular program? Sometimes we see a program and we get really excited and we don't want to believe that our project is not quite actually a good fit for it, so we kind of try to shoehorn it in. So I think it's really important to look at fit, because we might be able to find you another program that's a better fit. So really figuring out whether your project that you have in mind makes sense in the program that you're looking at. Another tip would be to open an application to actually go in and register for a TAC account. If you don't already have one, open up that application, make a note of the materials that are required, and then just go away and start to pull all those materials together. You can contact your grant program manager. That would be me in this situation. You can ask questions. We can discuss your idea. If you want feedback on your idea or like advice or anything like that, I'm totally happy to chat with you. We would just set up an appointment to a phone or a Zoom, whatever you need. Tip number 4 would be give yourself loads of time, just so that you can pull together all those CVs if you need to bring CVs together of your different collaborators. Those support materials, if you have to edit video or anything like that, can be a bit time consuming. So just give yourself loads of time. Craft your project summary and overview, just really using clear, direct language. And my colleague Kevin from the Community Arts Program always talks about this in this way that I really always want to steal, and it makes so much sense, is just simply who, what, when, where, and why. When you break it down that way, it just is so much nicer and it makes a lot of sense. So yeah, you don't have to use like, you know, academic language or, you know, citations or anything like that. Just very simple, clear, super clear language about what you want to do and why. 6, create a realistic budget. So what we really want to see is just breaking down each of those budget line totals to make sure that the really good, proper artist fees are being paid and all the expenses kind of make sense. Gather your support materials together, talked about that. Getting feedback is really helpful. If you could just ask a friend or a colleague, maybe even someone who isn't in the arts, that's always really helpful. And just take a look at it for you and, you know, ask you questions or kind of try and imagine what the grant review panel might not understand or might want to sort of ask more questions about. It's really helpful to do that. So you just need to fill in the grant application. It's actually pretty simple. It's all online. Just follow the instructions, complete all the fields, make sure you haven't missed anything. And if you're not totally sure how much detail to go into, you can just use those word limit counts as a guide. So, you know, if you see that you have like 200 words left that you haven't used, you know you probably haven't written quite enough. If you've gotten to the end of your word count and you haven't even really started to describe your project yet, you probably are going into too much level of detail. So just like pulling it back and adjusting it to that word count is kind of what you want to think about. And then the one thing I really wanted to share about final reports is that the final report is really for us, you know, it's really for us to know how it went for you. What did you learn? What went really well? What was a total disaster? It's really helpful for us to know because it helps us sort of redesign our programs to make them better for you. So you can just be totally honest in your final report. No future, grant review panel is going to look at this. It's just something for us internally. It really helps us design the program. So you can just talk right to us. I love reading final reports, so you can know that when you're writing that I'm actually enjoying finding out how your project went. So this is my contact info. Probably most of you have it because I've emailed you already, but you can email me or call me, and if you want to get together and talk about your application, I'm very happy to do that. So right now what I'd like to do is I'm going to stop this share here. I'd like to turn it over to Elizabeth to talk about Toronto.
Alrighty, hi everyone. My name is Elizabeth Malek, and I am an area manager with Toronto Public Library. My branches are in the northwest end of the city, but I also am your liaison for the Artist in the Library program, and it's really a beloved program for the library. We've had the pleasure and the honor of hosting many artists at our branches since 2014. As you know, Toronto is very diverse, and every community has its own personality. So having the opportunity to bring the arts into all of the communities in the west, north, and east ends, is important to us, and it's valued by the users of the library, and it really creates quite the experience for our customers who may not have the opportunity to get downtown and experience arts, on a regular basis. So, as Erika already alluded to, COVID has had the library pivot in a lot of different ways in terms of how we've been delivering services. We've been working over the last few months to get our 100 libraries back open, and I think we're in the 80s right now. We've still got a little bit to go. I think we've got about 20 left to go, something like that. And we are offering all kinds of services right now in terms of book borrowing, access to computers, access to study space, but we haven't resumed programming yet just because the whole situation with public health and, safe, we're not there yet in terms of resuming programs. So for the artists who were part of last year's grant applications, we'll be working with them on their contingency plan. And as Erika alluded in her presentation to you, we want you to have a contingency plan in place, because if something were to happen again, a year, in 2021, we'll need to have options to help you animate the libraries in a different way. And we have been quickly, in March, we moved to gearing up for online programming. And if you go to the PPL website, you'll see our online programs that we're offering throughout the week through use of Crowdcast. And so that's a streaming software that we are, or product rather, platform rather, that we're using to deliver programs online, and that would be an option. Also, if we would have the option of having installations in branches of some kind, could be in our windows, could be on the floor somewhere, or as Erika mentioned, having the option of through our curbside pickup of kits of some kind, where you could engage in that way, and it could be in a part of an online program. If you were going to deliver a workshop, that would be an option as well. In terms of where you are right now in terms of your application, I do invite you to go visit the branches that you are interested in working with. We did provide you with a profile of each branch. Each branch did allude to the various programs that would work, or the various types of art that would work at their location. We have large branches, we have very small branches, and I think it's really important to read those profiles and take the chance, if you can, to go visit them so you understand what kind of space there is. Some branches have multiple program rooms, they have big entry points or main floors where there is an opportunity to do something, and some have very small spaces, or they may not have a program room. And I think it's really important to understand that. You'll also get a sense of what it's like, what the surroundings are in the community, and what kind of activity within, the vicinity of the library, and what's that like, because, that'll draw people in to your installation or to your program. I am happy to facilitate connections to the branches as the branches get themselves back and up and running fully. It will may be helpful for me to do those sort of introductions, so you can perhaps make an appointment with the branch head. So each branch has a branch head who's the main supervisor of the branch, or another staff person who would be your contact or lead on the program at that particular location. So that is something that I am happy to facilitate, and I'll pop my email address into the chat, and I'm sure that Erika can also make that available to you. Erika, am I missing anything at this point?
I feel like that's great. I feel like we'll have a lot of really interesting questions, so I think we could I think that's
I'll leave it at that then.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you
Awesome.
again. It's really a pleasure to be here tonight.
Thank you so much, and thank you for being our partner. We love working with TPL so much. It's really great. So I want to just open up the questions before I sort of ask you to state your questions or whatever. I just want to remind folks again that we are recording, and if you don't want to have your face or your voice as part of this recording, we totally respect that. If you want to just pop your question in the chat, we can respond to questions that way. I might just start pulling from a couple questions, because there's really, really great ones popping up in the chat that I feel like will be useful. So one of the first questions is around, should I apply as an individual or should I apply as a collective? There are definitely some things to think about before you do that. Shall I give you folks a little moment there to switch off? I see that the ASL interpreters want to switch. Thanks, Mel. Hi, Carmel. Yeah, this is a great question. Should you apply as a collective? Should you apply as an individual? Maybe you're collaborating with some folks, and it could go either way. A couple things to think about. If you apply as an individual artist, and if you get a grant, you will receive a T4A in the full amount of that in the grant amount. So that's something to think about in terms of your taxes. Do you feel like that makes sense for you to be receiving that T4A? Can you handle writing off those expenses? Just something to think about. If you apply as an individual, the payment will come to you as an individual. So you'll have to put your own personal bank information in, and the funds will be transferred that way. If you apply as a collective, if you don't already have a bank account in the name of that collective, you will need to go to a bank and get an account in that exact name. It can't be in a different name, and the funds can't be transferred to an individual. It has to be in the exact name of the collective that you used for your application. So usually it's pretty, straightforward to do this, and it's certainly possible. There may be some bank fees associated with keeping a bank account open. So that's just something for you to think about. Some people prefer to use a collective when it really is a collective. It's multiple artists coming together to make a project. And in some cases, it may really be more of an individual project that you're bringing people in on. And so it may make more sense for you to apply as an individual. If you want to discuss it, the nuances, you can always talk to us. Another question was around, can we go over the 2 streams at TAC again? Certainly. So Toronto Arts Council has 2 different streams of funding. One is called Arts Disciplines, and that's sort of like theater, dance, music, and so on. And that would be either operating or project funds in those different arts discipline categories. And then our other envelope of funding is called strategic programs. And some of those programs include artists in the library, animating historic sites, animating Toronto parks, animating Toronto streets, a lot of animating things, Open Door, Artreach. So these are some of the strategic programs. So you can have a grant in each of those categories. Does anybody want to pop on and ask a question with their actual, with the, do you want to be unmuted to ask a question? Anyone want to put a hand up or anything? Can you make 2 applications for the same deadline? Discipline-based and strategic. Not totally sure I understand that question, but I'll take it to mean, you know, could you make 2 applications for the Artists in the Libraries program? The answer would be no. You can only submit 1 application at a time, and that would be the rule for any of the Toronto Arts Council programs. You can also, if you're applying as an individual artist, you cannot also apply to be part of a collective or an organization. So it really does need to be just 1 application at a time as yourself. So the budget, sorry, go ahead, yeah?
Sorry, I just noticed someone put up their hand, so
oh, great.
I can unmute you, Julia, if you'd like to ask your question, if you're comfortable with that.
Hi there. I'm just wondering whether you mentioned this was a program that had a larger, a smaller number of larger grants, and now thinking through to reaching out to people in COVID and trying to do this a little differently. Can you give an example of the you know, a successful Artists in the Library grant that's engaged communities? I'm interested in learning how you're going to assess, you know, how people have brought communities into the work.
Yeah, I mean, I think people have done this in so many different ways. I'm thinking of a project that's actually underway right now at Cedar Brae branch by a group called Community Story Collective, and they do digital storytelling. That's kind of their field of expertise. And so what they do is bring community members in to learn different digital storytelling methods and to collaboratively create with them their own individual like digital sort of stories, which are then presented to the community. So that's one way of engaging in that kind of collaborative creation way. There've been all sorts of different formats that people have used. The project actually that the image, the first slide image that I had up in the slide presentation today was from an artist called Christopher Willis, who is a composer. And their project involved a number of different sort of modes of presentation. And one of them was a series of concerts called Quiet Concerts. So we had different composers come into the library and perform these concerts that would be amplified and experienced wearing headphones by the audience. So it becomes almost a performance for the folks that aren't listening with the headphones. and that are actually seeing a bunch of people gathered around, instruments happening. So it kind of was a concert series, but at the same time, on other days of the week, he was bringing a group of youth together where they would explore different practices related to composition. One of the practices was listening. So they would learn how to sort of listen and then do these sort of deep listening experiments. And then another piece was instrument creation. So they actually made things like turntables and figured out how to amplify sound using found materials and things like that. So this was like a multimodal project that happened over months and months at the library. And in the end, the group actually presented some of their compositions. So that's just like another example of a sort of a mode of creation. There's tons of different examples across all disciplines, from visual arts to dance, theater, performance art, all kinds of different things that people have been doing as part of this program.
We have another question. Allison Rowe, I'm going to unmute you if you'd like to ask your question.
Thank you. Sorry, that's toddler noise. Don't worry about that. That's not my actual question.
I love it. It is welcome.
I was wondering I have a twofold question about using funds. Are we allowed to pay participants for being a part of a program? And are we allowed to use budgets to buy technology that participants then keep afterwards?
Oh, these are great questions. You absolutely can pay participants, certainly. I think it's great to, it's lovely to give people honoraria to sort of be reciprocal for what they're giving you, which is, their creativity and their stories and all their time. Different projects might have different modalities and different rationale for how they are reciprocal with those community members. And it may not necessarily always mean paying them. It may mean transportation, food, childcare, things like that, a supportive environment or whatever else. But it also may mean honoraria for participants, depending on how deeply they're engaged and how much time commitment. It's up to you to decide that. It's totally okay to do that. And your second question was, sorry.
Technology, is
yes.
it the budget to buy equipment that people keep?
Yeah, so this is a tricky question. I mean, the straightforward answer is kind of no, because capital purchases are not eligible expenses as part of any of the TAC programs. So, for example, purchasing, like laptops or, iPads or whatever, things like that. But there is a kind of a gray area about the difference between materials and capital equipment. And materials would be sort of considered things that you would use just for the auspices of that particular project that wouldn't necessarily, have a super long life after that. But there's also lots of gray area. Like if you buy a whole bunch of colored pencils, they're probably going to have a pretty long life after this project. So that's okay, but you can't necessarily buy everyone a new computer. I think that would be kind of like pushing the scope. So yeah, there's a gray area between material and capital expenses. And if you're not sure, we can discuss it, take it on a case-by-case basis. We don't have a great definition, to be honest, from CRA. So we are always trying to find where that line is. So there was a question here around a budget contingency. No, you don't need to submit a contingency budget, sorry, because this is a pretty small budget in the first place. It's, a $10,000 project budget. We understand that things will change in almost any artistic project. And so it's okay for things to change even substantially from your sort of grant application to, when you're actually undertaking the project and then reporting on it at the end. It's totally okay for things to change. You just have to write about it in your final report and then tell us how it went. That also helps give us great information about, what kinds of expenses are needed for these kinds of projects. It's very useful. Is outside the branches for like a, in a park type of a situation acceptable? That's a good question. Some of the branches have lovely outdoor space. Some of them have community gardens. Some of them are on parks. To some extent, yeah, you can certainly use those outdoor spaces. There may be reading gardens. Some of the parks have reading gardens. Yeah, just, if you're thinking about that kind of activity, just reach out to Elizabeth and she'll let you know, put you in touch with that branch head, and just make sure that the area that you're imagining the programming taking place in would be feasible and safe and would be okay.
We have another raised hand. Moza, I'm going to unmute you if you're okay with that.
Thank you. I'd like to ask about an open studio kind of project. If I'm a visual artist, if I wanted to set up a kind of a studio in the library for the duration of my residency and produce work, would that be considered an eligible project if there's, some kind of community engagement component? Could I do that? Is there, I guess it would depend branch to branch if I could install the work, if, and, if there's space to do some kind of messy work. I'm just trying to imagine if I could do a sort of an open studio kind of project.
Yeah, something like that has definitely happened in the past, and it's definitely possible. I think some people have had a really good experience with Open Studio, and other people have really struggled because it's really sometimes difficult to get people out when they're not really sure what to expect and how to behave. They may feel really uncomfortable walking into a space where you're kind of working, and they may not know how to engage with you. On the other hand, there's this really lovely artist, this ceramic artist named Paul, whose last name I'm completely drawing a blank on right now. This amazing artist who's done some really interesting work in that way, where he took actually his throwing wheel and put it right in the foyer of the library branch, and was just there, like throwing pottery, allowing people to come and sit and give it a try. Like, it was sort of a performance, but it was also kind of a demonstration. But he also has this really beautiful way of just chatting with people and saying hello to them as they walk in, and really engaging people in that way. So there's all sorts of different types of options, and you don't need to necessarily relegate your programming to the programming room. It could actually take place right out in the stacks. And there's all sorts of there are all sorts of great examples of artists having done projects like that. So I think that could definitely work. Yeah. So here's a question: is it okay to apply for this grant and then apply for other grants like Animating Toronto Streets or Visual Arts grants? I feel like we pretty much covered that. This grant is a strategic program, so is Animating Toronto Streets, so it will be either or. You would not be allowed to apply for both. But yes, certainly you could have a visual arts grant and an artist in the libraries grant. They couldn't be for the exact same project over the same dates. You would really have to keep those projects separate, or projects can be iterative. Certainly you could have a visual arts grant to do a project, and then you could reproduce that project for the library. That's totally okay to do that. Is there a timeline or particular sort of requirement for a number of hours or particular dates for the residency? No. I think that it's really up to you to determine the shape of your project and how it works. I think in the earlier days of this program, we had definitely sort of wanted programs to be taking place, between September and December. But those were programs that were really happening intensively, and they were happening on site. To the extent that's possible now, we're really unsure. And so I don't think you need to feel necessarily restricted by particular dates. If you need to extend your project over a longer period of time, that's totally okay to do that. Just if you're not sure, just get in touch and we can discuss what you're thinking about, and just you know, make sure it makes sense in the program, in the application. If you're not tied to a particular branch, can TAC help match you? Absolutely. Some projects may be extremely site specific, may be really deeply connected to a particular community, geographical community, or demographic communities. Some may not. Some may be, you know, open to being matched with any branch on our list. Some projects may say, you know what, I'm Scarborough based. I actually just want a Scarborough branch. That'd be better for me because I'd like to do some on-site programming, or whatever the case may be. You may just have, everyone may have a slightly different reason why they may want to choose a particular branch, or a number of branches that may be preferable to them. So we can just really take that on a case-by-case basis. And certainly you may not get the branch you want. It'll really be, the grant review panel will have a real job to do it's a real puzzle, this adjudication. It's really about matching the most suitable project for a particular branch. And some projects can really go anywhere. And so, you know, you may apply for a branch and get put at a different branch. You may get the branch you want. You may be surprised. You may put in your application that you'll go anywhere. You may say, you know, I only want North York branches. There's all sorts of different possibilities. It's pretty wide open. Oh, I think this is a question, Tasneem. I've applied for the community arts grant to do a project at Flemington Park Library. Haven't got the results back. Would it be okay for me to apply to do the same project at Fairview? Absolutely. If it's a different dates, different location, same project, no problem.
We have another raised hand. Sonia, I'm gonna unmute you if that's okay.
Hi, Sonia.
Hi. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah, thanks.
Oh, great. Erika and the rest of you. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello. So my question is, oh, sorry, I'm Sonia Aime from Afro Jazz Collective. We focus on music and poetry. What we're doing this time based on this experience with the COVID, we would like to bring the African storytelling and music, which I was able to explore during this COVID-19. And it was pretty successful. And now we want to try to take it to the next level with the team and with the inclusion of a videographer, plus my guitar player, Peter Opong. And what we want to do this time is to try to engage a broader audience by requesting them to submit stories they have, you know, learned from their childhood, or stories that are very meaningful to them, apart from the stories that we'll be researching on our own in the libraries based on the books they have available in the libraries. But really would like to explore connecting the people to be able to submit stories via videos. And I'm wondering if we will be able to pay some of the people who will be submitting their stories. For instance, if we make a selection, we might select 1 or 2 stories. We would like to pay to those people. And they might not be from Canada, because our audience, mine particularly, is really very large. So if I post an ad, you know, a call on my page, I'm gonna have like proposals from across the world. So what happens if I like a story from someone in Australia or in Cameroon, and I decide to use the story from their country, and I would like to compensate them for that. So how would that work?
That would really be up to you to decide. I mean, you know, you're a Toronto-based organization, so you're eligible to apply. And yeah, if it involves international artists, that's no problem.
Okay, okay, that's
Yeah,
all. And I learned from your previous answer to a question regarding purchasing equipment for the project. For instance, to purchase a video camera would not be eligible, correct?
that's right. Yeah, that would be considered a capital equipment purchase.
Okay, okay,
But you
all right.
could rent one, and you know,
Exactly.
if you want with your own money to buy one and then rent it from yourself for the purposes of this project, that's totally okay to do that as well.
Okay, okay, all right.
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks, thanks a lot.
Thanks, Sonia.
Okay, bye.
Any
Sorry, I muted Erika accidentally.
That's okay. I'm just gonna respond to Bethany's question and Tasneem's question here, and then maybe Julia, we could ask to speak live. For a performance-based collective program, if our performance can be repeated multiple times at different branches, do we have to apply for multiple performances? Okay, so the Artisanal Library residency is going to be for a specific branch. So you can't apply to like tour around to multiple branches. Your programming would be just attached to one particular branch. And then Tasneem is asking, does the project have to start and end in 2021? If we want to start it later, would it be better to apply next year? You certainly could apply next year. If you needed, you know, the original program design was meant for projects to take place in 2021, but if you needed an extension of that, if you felt like you needed to go into the spring of the following year, we could just extend it. That's not a problem. But if it's a project you're really seeing taking place in 2022, yeah, you could certainly wait until next year. If you're not sure, we could discuss it if you want to just like have a phone chat to talk about it. So maybe Julia, shall we unmute Julia?
Julia, you're unmuted? No?
I don't think it worked.
Oh, there we
Trying
go.
to find myself to unmute myself. Thank you. Envisioning, looking ahead at 2021, we don't know what's happening with COVID. I'm with Snug Harbor Dance, so often we have done small, you know, neighborly gatherings looking at folk dance and cultural dancing. So, I mean, not lively stuff with 300 people, but nevertheless, I'm wondering whether you think that it's a good idea to plan to not just have a little bit of a vague contingency plan, but with something where there's activity, to definitely have it very constrained with, you know, the maximum protocols, and then make sure that there's video that people can enjoy maybe in a loop in the library branch afterwards or something like that. Are you looking for really strong COVID mindfulness around active things with people?
Yeah, I mean, you may want to consider what your plan A might be, you know, like your plan A might be, you know, a small group in the library, and your plan B might be a very small group outside the library or digital. It's really going to be, I think, project by project, you know what I mean? Because every project will be so different. And yeah, certainly like there may be things you can do like digital kind of installation, or, you know, workshops online or I feel like there are a lot of different things that people are coming up with. So yeah, you may want to have a plan A if everything goes smoothly, you know, if everything's kind of okay, maybe like looking more like it looked in, you know, June, July, potentially. So maybe there could be a small workshop that would happen inside. Probably that's your best case scenario, you know, is to do,
Yeah.
I think, multiple things on a very small scale if they're in person.
Very good, thank you.
Anybody else? Maybe we'll just take a couple more questions and we'll wrap up. Nope, that's okay. All right, well, great. Thank you so much for your amazing questions. And so thank you to all of you for coming, and please reach out. You know, we're here to support you. If you want to discuss your project, if you need help with your application or anything like that, just reach out and get in touch. And thank you so much to Elizabeth, and thank you to Mohammed, and thank you to our ASL interpreters today, and to Deaf Spectrum for supporting us on this project. And this video will be online, so please share it with your friends.